Hey there, this is Matthew Jennings, and on this episode of Peachjar Extra Credit, we are talking declining enrollment, and I'm very lucky to be joined by Boulder Valley and Jeffco, and we're going to dive into just some of the reasons you might experience with declining enrollment and some tips and tricks you might gain from this conversation and things you can do in your community and look at to help increase your student enrollment. So stay tuned. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. I know that you're extremely busy and this is a very busy time of the year, so I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me, Kim and Randy. Let's start with just a little bit about your background and your district that you serve and what your role is there. So Kimberly, let's start with you.
Yeah, so my name's Kimberly Mahugh, and I'm the Executive Director of Communications at Jeffco Public Schools. We are the second largest school district in Colorado. We are situated just west of downtown Metro Denver, and we serve a geographic area of 770 square miles.
So big.
Yes, and we have about 138 schools across that area. We serve suburban, urban, and rural mountain communities. And for me, I've been at Jeffco about 18 months now. I started my career in healthcare and worked there for almost 20 years before coming over to public ed.
That's awesome. Very big. So how long does it take to get from one side of the district to the other?
Yeah. Honestly, it can take up to an hour to go from our more downtown schools up into the mountains.
Wow. And we're in Colorado. It's absolutely gorgeous here. We happen to be at Columbine High School right now. Just beautiful driving in, and we are surrounded by the gorgeous mountains. Colorado is just a very beautiful spot. Randy, what about you in your district?
I'm Randy Barber. I'm the Chief Communications Officer for Boulder Valley School District. We're neighbors. Hey, neighbor. We're just north of Jeffco, kind of northwest of Denver proper. And we include, similar to Jeffco, some mountain communities up into Nederland and that kind of thing. And then suburban communities, and then Boulder, being sort of our primary sort of urban area, if you will. We have about 28,000 students, and I came from a larger school district into this one and have watched this one sort of shrink a little bit. So it'll be a good conversation about that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that's what we want to talk about today. And I had the same experience with the school districts that I worked in communications as well, about 22,000. And one of those districts I started, it was 22,000. And when I left, it was just under 19, something like that. And so, the decline in enrollment is big. Let's just jump right in and talk about what your experience is then in each of your districts and maybe what you think some of those root causes are. So let's just establish maybe what's happening right now in your market. So Kimberly, let's start with you at Jeffco. What do you see in declining enrollment? What do you think is behind some of that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I came to Jeffco about 18 months ago. I had most recently worked at Children's Hospital Colorado here in Metro Denver, serving a pediatric population. And it was very interesting because in my experience in healthcare, particularly pediatrics, we were experiencing the impact of the declining birth rates and something that in healthcare we termed the baby bust.
Wow.
And just realizing a lot fewer needs for pediatric healthcare services, for labor and delivery rooms, pediatric intensive care units, et cetera. And so we were starting in healthcare to really study these trends, I would say about 5 years ago, because it was healthcare. Obviously, there's a lot of money involved in healthcare. And so it was really impacting the bottom line. So it was very interesting then transitioning over into the K-12 education sphere, just really at the tail end of the pandemic. And when I arrived in Jeffco, the conversation really centered around the fact that we had seats to serve 96,000 students.
Wow.
But we had about 65,000 enrolled in our district managed schools and another 10,000 or so in our charter schools. And that kind of decline in enrollment hadn't really systematically been addressed in Jeffco. It had been addressed in pockets with some emergent closures the couple previous years to my arrival. And our Board of Education finally said, you know what, to the superintendent, no more emergency closures. We want a comprehensive plan that looks at our system as a whole to ensure that we are right sized to serve the students who live here today.
Yeah, it's really tricky to do that with facilities and staffing.
Yes.
Okay, well, and baby bust, I had not heard that before, that term, but it's very real, and I'm sure that's going to come up. A couple of things that came out of that, neighbors for sure. I think there's something I'm going to say about that later too, and just how you two work together, which is great. But The baby bust, very interesting. And that's something that is a trend that we're seeing across other industrialized nations as well, outside of the United States, is that there is a significant and serious decline in birth rates. In fact, there are conversations now being had, leading up to this, you would hear a lot about how, we're overpopulated, we're over too many people. As it turns out, there aren't too many people. And in fact, now there's conversations being had around, can we sustain our current way of living with the decline in birth rates?
Yes.
And so there's even some countries, like I think it's China, in the next like 10 or 15, 20 years, something like that, where their population will be reduced by half. It is right now. And that's just based on the fact that they know how many babies were born and they know what it's going to be. And so very interesting.
It is interesting. And I think it's an important part of this conversation in terms of, I think our role in school leadership and in communication specifically is to really be sense makers for our community. And I think there's part of this that feels just very weird to people, this conversation of declining enrollment and closing schools. And the natural way I think our minds are wired, especially in our Western, economic system, is, well, if something's declining, that means your product's not good enough, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you can't educate kids that were never born. And I think so much of our modern public education system in the U.S. was really designed and developed following World War II and the development of our suburban communities. And we know there's far fewer children being born today than there were then. That's
all so true. So I really appreciate your perspective there, especially coming from that healthcare sector. Randy, what about you? What are you seeing there in Boulder Valley?
I think what you're talking about is so tied to what we're experiencing in Boulder. You have these big macro effects. So again, at a national, state, and locally, we're seeing those births, being much lower. And that means, far fewer as that trend continues. Less kindergartners, less preschoolers coming into the school district. So naturally, that's just going to flow through the system over time. And I think it's cyclic. These things do have ebbs and flows, partly, determined on, how many people are moving to Colorado. What are those economics that are going on there that either attract or in the later years here, we've been seeing some folks kind of say, okay, it might be too expensive, which is kind of what we're living through in Boulder and in Denver, I think, as well. You see these housing prices be crazy. I mean, the amount that my house has grown in terms of the cost is wild. In just the last, I've been in Boulder Valley for 6 years. It's crazy how expensive it is now. So in our area, you have both growth on our eastern edge where we have lower cost, suburban sort of homes being built. And in the Boulder area, it's very, very expensive. It typically is attracting the folks that are coming in for the, high tech companies like Google, that kind of thing. And so they can pay those high amounts. Might be young professionals that are coming in, don't have kids, don't have any plans right away for kids, that kind of thing. And so, essentially they're able to afford these really pricey houses, and that dynamic then pushes out families that just can't afford, the kind of mansions that we're talking about. They weren't mansions back when they were built. I will say that too. I mean, sometimes these houses are being, pop-topped, is what we call it, at least, right? They're turned in from a bungalow into, 2-story, modern home. And, so the dynamics right across, right along the foothills there, very, very pricey. And so really, again, people coming into our district, including our superintendent, he moved in a year after I did, and, would talk about the fact that just finding a home at his price point was difficult. And so he could understand that, a lot of our employees drive in from other places. And then, additionally, again, families, it's hard to, again, if you have a great product, we know our brand is good, but ultimately how far are people really willing to drive, and location is a story in schools typically. So, if they're not able to afford, you don't have as many kids, that's going to impact your school.
So true. Well, yeah, we see that in California as well. We I forgot what the number is, but hundreds of people every day are leaving California because of just the rise of the expenses. And so that leaves us with an aging population that's aged out of having kids. They're kind of more or less stuck with these golden handcuffs because they have all this equity in these homes. So that, and low interest rates too for some of the buyers. And so they stay, and the surrounding homes around our neighborhood schools have just aged out. And so we see that a lot as well. Well, let's dive into then some of the things strategies that you and I have some as well that we can share with people that are out there going through similar situations here, whether that's the economy, the local economy, or it's, birth rates, but whatever is causing their declining enrollment. For sure, I think the two of you came with some really grounded ideas of what that is and what the cause of the relationship is there. So for anybody out there watching, you definitely want to dig into that data, that information. Look at your capture rate. That's another one too. How many school-age kids are in your boundaries? And then look at how, what's your enrollment, so are you capturing 80%, 90%? Because that'll kind of guide some of the conversations you need to have around what kind of work you need to lean into. So let's talk about some of the strategies. If you want to start, that's totally cool. But what are some of the things you're doing around declining enrollment? And are you? Because as I know we know as well, the goal isn't maybe necessarily to capture every single student, right? Maybe we don't want every single student. But what are some of the strategies that you could share with others that will help with that decline?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. One of the things that you just said is, looking at who's in your area and what are they doing, right? And so I will say, again, looking at our neighbors, we've got great school districts that surround us. There has been a little bit of trading. I think people have, in Colorado, we have a choice ability, so people can opt in, open enroll, to another school that fits their kids' needs. And so certainly along our boundary line, on especially our east side, there's a lot of families, and I know that's what I hear in my own neighborhood, right? The parents that are speaking on the corner, or in the school parking lot, are oftentimes having these conversations about, over there in St. Vrain, this is what they've got going on here, or, I like the programming here. It's project based. I'd love to send my kid there. Those are the kinds of things that people are considering. So in our school district, our goal isn't to steal from our neighbor. Certainly put out, I think everybody's already having those conversations, so ensure that they're aware of what's going on. So we're actually, preparing for a big showcase in October, in which people can come to one place and talk to all the schools. It's something that we did when I was down in Douglas County and worked pretty well. Parents really appreciated that you didn't make them traipse to multiple open enrollments. They could kind of narrow their things and then go to the schools that they were most interested in.
That's good.
But, again, we're thinking about the folks that might be choosing a private school. COVID just happened. Yeah. And so that's another dynamic that's happening is a lot of people in our area chose homeschooling.
Yes.
And so our hope to a certain extent is to win them back. I think a lot of folks realized in those very early days, I know we did, that it's very difficult to educate students.
Yes, it is.
Your own children.
Yeah.
We had a preschooler, and I think that was my poor wife, would love to kind of, make sure that those kids can stay in the school, because that was very rough on all of us, but specifically her. But, I think that idea of we're here, it's a great, inexpensive, but quality option. All of our public schools offer great, different things. And the other thing I would say too, really quick, is this, again, cyclic. This isn't the first time that at least our area has experienced things. Prior to my time in Boulder Valley, they did have declining enrollment, also white flight from certain schools. And so they had to address it in some way. They closed a couple schools. That scar is still there. So we want to try to manage through that so that that people aren't constantly thinking about that school that you closed. But sometimes that's a necessity, as you guys saw. But then also, what are the programs that meet people's needs and will draw people to the right places in the district? Again, if you've got openings on your west side of town and a lot of demand on your east side, maybe there's some things that you can do in those west side towns, STEM or certain things like that might be interest to people that will draw them back to that side without, again, all of us are in the same position. You'd hate to be stealing from your neighbor.
Yeah, that's a really good point. You said a couple of things. One is you are districts, you are neighboring school districts. You work really well together. You have a great relationship, which is critical. I know in my previous district, what we would do around kinder registration is we'd send postcards out to the entire all the zip codes we serve, and there was some overlap with our neighboring districts in Irvine and Santa Ana, and so. What was really beautiful about that, because of our relationship, and so if this is something you're looking at doing, just keeping that professional, relationship going, is I would always call up, shout out to Furman and Santa Ana and Annie Brown over at Irvine, but we would call each other and just say, hey, heads up, I'm sending out a flyer. I'll send you a proof. You can see what it's going to be. Some of your families will get it. That way I can go to the superintendent and say, hey, so-and-so is sending this out. Some of our families are going to get this, because the first thing that's going to happen is one of those board members is going to get that flyer for a competing district and want to know if we knew about it. And so I don't want the
And where's
superintendent
yours?
caught flat-footed. Exactly. And then where is yours? And so that's the other thing too, right? Like, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've been there, right? I'm sure you have. Yeah. So, and definitely, that's one tactic that we can talk about as well. But the advertising through the use of postcards and mailers is really strong. You mentioned something else there that sparked a thought for me, and that is when we are losing families to maybe private schools or homeschools, another strategy I've heard other school districts using quite well, like they're leaning on the principals for this, is making personalized calls. Like, hey,
Yes.
where's Johnny? I really, he was doing a great job with in the play last year, like something specific tailored for Johnny, right, who's disappeared, and really drive home the point that these are schools that are really kind of families. Like, they're very community based, very tight knit. The staff cares, the administration at the school cares, the other kids care. When somebody disappears, everybody kind of wants to know, hey, how you doing? And we'd love to have you back. We have a back to school night coming up. We'd love to invite you back out and get you back out to the site just to see him again and have Johnny come see some of his friends. So that's another tactic that I've heard is being leveraged pretty well. What about you, Kimberly? What do you have going on Jeffco?
Yeah, well, I would echo a lot of the ideas that Randy shared, particularly around understanding, I think, using data is really important. Understanding who, I think you said it earlier, Matthew, like who is in your zoned school areas, and also arming your principals with that data to really understand what is their capture rate. And if students are not choosing their school, where are they going? And then also tapping in to understand and do a little surveying of why. When families leave your district, we always provide a survey and get data on why are they choosing to leave. Yeah. Because I think that's helpful to understand what are our families looking for and what do they need. So I would just say, think about data. Think about the information you would like to know about your school communities, so that you can be more strategic and thoughtful in how you connect with families.
I love that. That goes back to something you said too, Randy, where if you're using that data and if family, you're doing an exit interview kind of a thing, and you then can see like, well, I'm losing families on like my west side schools and they're going to east side or going to a different district because they're saying X, Y, Z, and those are programs or services or whatever you can bring in to try to keep people. Those really good points. Yeah. And I don't know if everybody does that. I know in our previous district we did, but I don't know if you're listening to this and you're not doing those calls and finding out why families are pulling their kids out of the district. That's a huge one.
Well, one thing I mentioned, so because of this declining enrollment situation, we've been doing some surveying to that exact extent. Why do you choose our school district? That's helpful to know. Yeah. Why are you choosing not to go to us? So we've been kind of surveying not just the people that are within the our own parents, but the community at large. And one thing I would say too is that sometimes that data is going to come back and tell you that they're choosing you because of choices that you've made. Like for us, LGBTQ, we've really made sure that our community is safe for those students. We've got a warm and incorporating, sort of environment. We've got transgender rules that are in place and that kind of thing. So there's some folks that have walked away. There's the old saying about, they choose, they walk with their feet. No, that's not how you say it. What does that say?
They vote with their
feet.
Vote with their feet.
Yeah, gosh, I totally messed that up. But they vote with their feet, and I think to a certain extent, in any of these situations, I think it's important still to be true to you and what your school district is, because you can look at that data and say, okay, we know how to capture them back. We can let go of all that. We can hear that culture war and we can react and say, okay, we're going to go a different direction. What we're saying is no. Maybe it's okay that we don't win everybody back. It may not be the
best fit for that family.
Yeah, I mean, we want to be a great choice for a lot of reasons, but there's a lot of reasons why people might not choose us, and that's okay.
That's a good point.
And I would say too, to that point, Randy, I'm always a big fan of celebrate what you have and what you are, and share that with families. Make them aware of what programs are available. Make them aware of what assets there are in your school, and lead with the vision of what your schools will provide. And the other piece of that, I would just say, so in Jeffco, we have 17 high schools, 17 different feeder areas. And something that we're talking about right now with our high school principals is really kind of making them almost like the lead principals of that whole area to really lead with a vision ultimately of those kids that are going to matriculate up and go to. So We're sitting right now in Columbine High School, giving people in this vision, both families and students, a vision for being a future rebel, right? And really creating and cultivating that sense of community and pride, which is, I think, something that is unique that our public schools can offer.
That's so true. Yeah, that's awesome. Putting people in positions where they have control over that, like your leadership, teams, really awesome. You said something too I just want to also highlight, which is data, Kimberly. And it's funny because so far in all of the Peachjar Extra Credit episodes that we've done like 30 something. We've only released a handful, so stay tuned to the channel. There's a lot coming your way. But in every single one, I think data is like the underlying thing. Data. So definitely make sure you're leaning into that data. You said something else, Kimberly, that sparked a thought about making sure that you're demonstrating the programs and services that you offer. And maybe we can talk just a little bit about some of those specific strategies. Obviously websites, huge. Social media is big. Obviously social media is really great for a lot of reasons, and it's a good way to connect with so many members of your community that may not even have students in the district. Shorts and the reels and all the stuff there. We can talk about that. Advertising, and dollars that you're spending on advertising. Are you boosting posts on social media? Are you putting ads out in magazines? Are you doing postcards, mailers, advertisements before movies in the movie theaters? So let's talk maybe just a couple of the specifics around how you feel that your two districts are really highlighting the programs and services that make you unique.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say that, again, coming from the private sector and in a business with a lot of money and very sophisticated advertising, bringing that lens to me of the school district, for me, I can't justify the idea of buying movie ads and different things like that.
They're very expensive.
They're very expensive. And I don't know that they reach and accomplish what you're trying to do. You're not selling a widget or a product. Yeah. However, I do think something that's a huge asset that the private sector doesn't have is you already have a strong repository of how to communicate with the people who you want to connect with. We have their email addresses. We have, they're connected to our social media accounts. So you have a lot of owned media. And I think people sometimes discount the power of their own media channels. Yeah. And so lean into that. Really maximize your social media. Really put your messages out there. I think I can justify maybe boosting some social media posts here and there where it makes sense in a very targeted way, going back to your data. And the other thing I would say as you go into a campaign where you're trying to reach folks is you need to lead with what does the win look like, right?
Oh, yeah.
What does the win look like? And I always say you can't grow what you can't measure. So before my team starts any sort of comms campaign, we define what does the win look like. So for example, we have a school right now, a high school that will become a 612 this next year, which has been part of our, in Jeffco, we have closed or consolidated 19 schools since 2021. And so this is a middle and high school that will become a 612. And so we are focusing some energies around making sure we're capturing families, particularly from the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade who have been leaving that system and coming back for high school. And so as we're doing that, just kind of really being thoughtful to know who are these families and how are we going to reach them?
Yeah, and that's a good point too. And actually, that's something I hear a lot. Maybe you can tell me if this is something you've experienced. It sounds like you did. Which is I've heard from other districts, they lose families at middle school and then they come back for high school.
Yes.
So looking at going back to the data that Kimberly is talking about here, it's really where are you losing families and why, and that exit interview process and all of that. What can you do to bolster those programs? Because middle school seems to be like that place. It's kind of interesting.
So for us in this space, as we're looking at that campaign, I feel like we have a target of if we can really capture this percentage of those middle school students into that new 612 program, that will be a win. But we're going into the campaign knowing that. We're knowing where we're missing right now. Yeah. We know why those parents are leaving for middle school, and we're targeting to address those.
That's huge.
And a shout out. I mean, I've been watching from across the borderline. that was a good example, too, of community activism.
Yes.
Like you guys really empowered your schools.
Yes.
And so for them to bring forward that suggestion, I mean,
yes,
that's not the case in a lot of situations, and so I think that's really powerful that they had a voice able to bring that forward.
Yeah,
this is pretty cool.
Thank you for mentioning that, Randy. And what Randy's talking about is in that 612 example, that school community and what we call an articulation area. So the whole elementary, middle that feeds into the high, all those principals came together with their families and brought to the Board of Education a vision for strengthening their articulation area by combining their very declining middle school with their thriving high school for a 612. And I think part of the reason, the community saw us close 16 elementary schools last year, and they really understood that reality that, based on the Colorado demographers statistics that say in our county, in Jefferson County, our population of school-age children has been steadily declining for 20 years, and it will continue. I think the community, that was the first time they really heard that.
Yeah.
Right?
Isn't that interesting?
And I think they made sense of that, Randy, and then said, okay, we see that, and we see our middle school now that could serve over 600 students is serving 250. So what do we want to do about that?
Yeah.
And they came forward with the vision.
That's awesome. And like you said, part of our role is really telling that story, making sure people are aware of what we're doing, what's going on, and just being open with all of that. And teaching parents and families and the community at large, because we also don't want the decline to look like you had mentioned earlier, I think, Kimberly, like, oh, it's a problem. It's something we're doing wrong.
Yeah.
The other thing, too, is the programs you're running now at this middle school level to really capture those students. That's really important information, because that's a population you don't want to lose, that you know you have some control over. Whereas, like, we can't control birth rates, we might not be able to control the economy and things that might be driving our families out or pricing them out of homes and jobs, but we certainly can control why our families leaving and then coming right back for high school. So that's a really great place to look at your data and find out what you can do there, which is cool.
The one other thing I would just say that I think is really powerful is we have a lot of wonderful things happening in our public schools. And I think what was an observation I've made coming to K-12 from a different industry is I notice a lot of deficit language around our public schools.
Okay.
But I instead think what inspires people and gets people engaged is leading with a vision. So as you're talking to your community, you could lead with declining enrollment, or you can lead with the vision for what you're offering in your community and the fact that you want to provide the most, thriving experience for the kids you're serving today, and getting people on board with what that would mean for them, full-time art, music, PE, versus saying our enrollment's declining and we can't have this and we can't have that.
That's a beautiful message. Yeah, that's a good takeaway right there. So if you tuned out, make sure you rewind and listen to what Kimberly just told you there. She's dropping solid gold. That's really amazing. Now let's talk really quickly about social media, because you had mentioned that there might be a time and place for boosting posts. I didn't do a lot of it, but I certainly did for very targeted campaigns like kinder registration or enrollment. Boosted posts out there, and my team over in student services said that there was a direct correlation between me boosting something out to the greater community at large and them seeing an increase in phone calls. So I know that there is strategies out there that work, and if you haven't done the boosting of stuff yet or paying, it really doesn't cost a lot. So I'd love to know what your experience there is, but it doesn't cost a lot, a couple $100, and you get to really target where that lands. And then you get to see analytics and data behind that. Make sure you're tracking that. I still question how real that is. You have to trust Facebook to give you the right information. So it is what it is. But like I said, there is actual data behind me boosting and phone calls coming in. And so I know that there's something that works. What's been your experience with social media and maybe boosting posts?
Yeah, I think what you're hitting on is a key element to this, that in most of the media that we've had to deal with in the past, there hasn't been a really direct way to know if it worked or not.
Yeah.
So I know with this showcase that's coming up, I've certainly gotten the push of okay, we want to see this everywhere. So that's got me out in places that we as a school, and I will say our school district up until 2018 was growing and was one of those kind of brands where, people moved to Boulder Valley because it's a great school district kind of thing. And I think we still have that moniker, but But now as you go downward, you got to think about things a little bit differently. So I'm looking at advertising. We don't typically, I've never had a budget for advertising, honestly. And if I'm going to spend, it's hard to kind of say, like you said, I'm going to go out there into this place that has no ability for me to tell if it's working or not. Yeah. When we go and put something on the back of an RTD bus, I don't know for sure. That's our transit authority, RTD. I don't know for sure how many people really get eyeballs. They'll give me numbers. I can track that kind of thing. But ultimately, when we put out a Facebook ad, you've got engagement. You can measure that. You can specifically choose demographic information. I'd say the other thing that you mentioned too that we're now doing is the idea of the mailer. That is a little bit more like, again, constrained and specific versus again just putting it out there. And I would say in a world where you've got a lot of school districts in one media market, we are going to do a little bit in television. Yeah. Advertising like on websites and that kind of stuff, which again is more trackable than just throwing it onto, the broadcast where you don't know, and it's the borderlines are not there. So like, I don't want to hurt my neighbors. We're trying to do something with our own deal, and I do want to circle back too with the power of all the network that you've got. Yes. So in Boulder Valley, we've got 56 schools. So what we've been trying to talk about is, what is that special sauce? Again, something that they haven't maybe had to worry about for a long time now. Yeah. But what is that really does set you apart? What's that value proposition in marketing terms, right? And maybe there are some schools that have to kind of lean into that a little bit. If you're in Netherland, and we do in Boulder Valley set aside our mountain schools as special places, right? Gold Hill just celebrated their 150th anniversary this weekend. That's great. They're the longest continuously running school in Colorado. Like, how cool is that? Yeah. So that by itself is a pretty cool thing. That's really cool. They only have, 15 students or something like that. And we don't expect that people are going to move to Gold Hill out of the way. So we're trying to kind of protect that special school status. But when you talk about like a Netherland or whatever, when students have a choice of going down the hill to go play football or staying in their community and maybe being hooked into hospitality, you've got a ski resort like just minutes away from that school. Yeah. So that's what that school's now leaning into is how do you build that career technical education experience so that if you're interested in the outdoors, if you're interested in working at a ski resort one day, the things that already have them moving to that, that area, then let's have you celebrate that, build that up, celebrate that. And again, if you've got the voices of 56 schools, far stronger than just one school district outlet, communicating out to a community. And then but the last thing I'll say about that too is I believe in ambassadors. Yeah. We did that with our Bond Mill project. You want to try to get folks that are in the community that are already kind of your cheerleaders to go carry that flag. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but I know I see in my neighborhood, people will put up yard signs for the darndest things. Totally. My kid plays soccer, or, my kid, whatever. Obviously, when we have graduations, I'm always super proud to see our graduate signs out there. But we're looking at having schools be able to have, I'm proud to be, and then ask me why I love my school so much, so that you're driving that. If people are already kind of leaning in and doing something, choosing that for their soccer club or for their charter school or for their private school in the neighborhood. We see a lot of those kind of already around. As a public school entity, I think we can kind of lean into that. And I'm never against stealing a good idea. Yeah. If it's working, I'll use it. Definitely.
So. And I think that's one thing that makes our particular roles unique. And I've seen this across the country now. And I've had a wonderful opportunity to meet so many great communicators across the entire nation. Not just in California, where I was very deeply involved with CalSPRA and that chapter, but all the SPRAs, and we share. Like we just give. Yep, I did this great, I did that great. You can have it. In fact, just put your name on it and send it out. That happens all the time in our profession, which I really love and respect, and I think is very unique to us. I know a lot of other professions where people just don't share as freely as we do. You said yard signs. That takes me back to a video I did with Christine Peck at Powell Unified. And they went out and they canvassed their neighborhood and asked people if they would put yard signs out for hiring because they needed staff. And so they have these hiring signs, come work for Powell Unified School District, and I quadrupled their number of applications. So yard signs, interesting. So if you're interested in that,
low cost, low energy.
Low cost, low energy, and you get your brand out there. Like things like you didn't mention billboards, and I don't know if either one of you are doing it, but that's just another one of those things where, the person renting it can tell you how many cars drive by, how many eyeballs see it, but you don't know that the registration that's coming in next week has anything to do with that billboard.
Right.
But having your brand out there, Nike doesn't need to advertise. Apple doesn't need to advertise, but you driving down the freeway, you're going to see billboards with their information, and they don't need you to see that to buy the new iPad, but that's that brand awareness. Those yard signs go a long ways for that. People are seeing that all over the place. Somebody that had pulled their kid, maybe gone to private or charter or homeschools, going to be looking at those all over the yard saying, well, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe I need to give that another look. So,
well, and I was inspired by when we were in St. Louis for the NSPR conference. I walked up to a rib place, and right there, the school district there had actually been very smart about, there was a place where a lot of kids were clearly living, and they put enrollment signs for the local neighborhood school. I thought that was a great idea.
That's great.
Because again, it's, you've already kind of determined like, okay, that's an area where the kids live. Why not go ahead and put your brand out there, let them know that it's an available option for them.
It's huge. Dr. Vitale, she's the superintendent at Oceanside Unified. She's absolutely amazing. So shout out to Dr. Vitale. She's a rock star. But her and I did like a round robin of all the new builds. And so all the new condos that were being built in Oceanside, we took like a couple of weeks and just made one pagers for the district, and then went into the sales offices and just said, hey, if you have prospective families coming in, or family, parents or guardians with kids, do you mind giving them our one pager or just making it available? And not one single company turned us down. They all took us up on putting our one pagers in their sales office. And I can't track exactly what we got out of that, but first opportunity that a family's coming into Oceanside, they're going to go look at this condo or townhome or a place to rent, and one of the first things they're going to get is a flyer on our district. So little things like you had just said make a big difference. And if you're interested, there is a video coming out with St. Louis Public Schools on just advertising and budgeting and dollars spending on advertising. We cover everything in that video: billboards, social media, TV, commercials, movies, the whole thing. So be sure to check that out on Peachjar Extra Credit. I don't think it's launched yet. That's with St. Louis Public Schools, and we cover that, which is cool. So we'll talk about that deeper there. But I really appreciate it. I think, this has been phenomenal. I really appreciate both of your time. And Kimberly, what a cool perspective to come in from the healthcare sector to public education. I really appreciate to learn a little bit more about that baby bust. I had not heard that terminology, but it really clicks when you look at the data and you look at our birth rates in the United States, and just being in control of our own narratives and telling our own stories. Obviously, leaning into the communications tools, like I think you've heard that you have access to all your network and emails that you have, and what messages are you sending there, websites, social media, making sure you're telling your story, leaning into like shorts and reels. I don't know how your experience is there, but I know that our shorts and our reels and our 1-minute videos are just getting thousands and thousands of views. So what a really awesome way to give your community a glimpse into the classroom and just short snackable bites, which is great. So as we kind of close out, I just want to open it up. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to share? And there doesn't have to be, no pressure, but anything we haven't talked about that final thoughts?
I guess just in closing, I would say just what I was mentioning earlier about leading with your assets and with a vision. And I think also allow your comms team to be sense makers on these topics in your community. Use data, lean into your demographer. That was so helpful to us in Jeffco. We had our state demographer come and present to our Board of Education and made that information available on our site. Just be transparent about what's happening in your schools. Like share, our deputy superintendent always talks about the balance of truth and hope. So painting that truthful picture, letting people know what things are, and then casting that vision and giving that hope, because there's so many wonderful things happening in our schools. And I feel like we all are in a place of great privilege to get to tell those stories.
So true. So well said. And I really appreciate what you said too about that deficit language and the words we use to tell our story, and maybe just a shift in that narrative. And I'm guilty of that too, just talking about declining enrollment and right sizing and staffing and all of that, but shifting that narrative in the way that you describe it and talk about it is critical. Randy, anything for you?
I think similar to what you were just saying, when I think about what's going on nationally right now, we're in a bit of a war. There's a lot of effort to sort of cast schools in a light that we're not needed anymore, that, that we should go to a different option. And yet there is so much amazing stuff that's happening. I know I'm a grad of the public education system, when I think about the astronauts, the amazing folks that come out of our systems, it's just wild. Yeah. And to be able to use these opportunities, like you said, don't look at the downside. As we're building this, we're looking at the things that we're most proud of, and then using this as a way to lift that up and say, look at what this school district is doing for your kids. Look at what it can do for them. I think that's a powerful option, and one that, here in Colorado, our COSPRA has been working on something that's called Our Schools, Our Community, to try to change that narrative. And I think if we can lean into that and use these opportunities, even though it's hard. Yeah. When you're talking about possible school closures, that's not an easy thing, but use it as an opportunity to rebuild and let people know the amazing stuff that's happening. I think it's well worthwhile.
That's beautiful. Beautiful message. Absolutely. Well, and like you said, staffing, right-sizing facilities, right-sizing staff is brutal. And it's not a pretty process. Difficult. And so it makes what you both have just shared even more critical, that you're out there telling the good stories, showing the great things that are happening in your districts, because truly, those of us that are blessed enough and lucky enough to be able to go into the classroom and see the great work that's happening, it's insanely inspirational. And it's why we do it every day. It's just such a great way to give back to the community and the world. So I can't thank you enough for taking this much time with me today. I know you've got really busy schedules and a lot to get back to. So I'm gonna close this up and let you go. But again, thank you so much for joining us and talking through this. I think it's a critical topic, so I appreciate it very much.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully you liked this. You found this helpful. Be sure to like, share, comment, and follow for more. Definitely get into the comments if you have questions. I know any one of us will take your phone calls. So if you have questions, please reach out directly. I didn't even ask them that. I just knew they'd say yes. Right?
We'll send them to you.
Send them my way. Send them my way. Yeah, but it's what we do. So it's all good. So yeah, if you have any questions about anything we talked about deeper here, please put those in the comments or feel to reach out directly, and we can talk about that. One of the things that's really fun about these videos is when I put them out, I inevitably get 3 or 4 people I've never talked to before hit me up and like, hey, can you put me in touch with so-and-so? Or, hey, you said this, like, what'd you do for this? And so it's been a lot of fun. It really is. So please don't hesitate to reach out. We love it.
Awesome.
All right, we'll see you later. That's all we got for now. See ya.
Bye.